Business Takeout presents.
This is Ched Talks with Chedwick Crieghtney.
Hey, welcome to Ched Talks. It's another great night. I'm so happy to have everyone here tonight. And I have two special guests tonight. But first, let me tell you a little about Ched Talks. Ched Talks is a platform which looks to inspire, motivate, and educate from the male's perspective. Our job is to make sure that everyone that tunes in here with us tonight either learn something or go away with something that they can build on. So thank you again for joining me tonight. Tonight's guest with me is Farley and Pastor Andre. We're going to talk about something very special, something near and dear to my heart, as well as maybe some of you out there. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully getting some feedback from the audience. And, you can voice use your voice. Send in some questions and we'll be able to answer your question here live while we talk to you. Now, what we want to talk about tonight, we want to focus on the changing role in today's environment. We're talking about from the male's perspective, how do we see the U2 movement? How is it affecting you? How is it affecting society as a whole? And I'm going to have these two gentlemen jump right in and answer some of those questions for us. So let's start with you, Andre. Tell me a little bit about how you see the changing role from a perspective of the church, perhaps, and perhaps the people that are coming into you for counseling, for coaching. How do you deal with the changing role that men have to play in their homes?
You know what? Cheddy, first of all, let me just say thanks for having me to join you, gentlemen. I really do appreciate it. From a church perspective, I don't know that we are being as impacted as the world is, per se. Right. And that's just because, as a pastor, as a person, I've always advocated for justice. And the reality is it's not a U2 movement, it's a justice movement. And at the end of the day, I think that what God is calling for people to do is to treat each person the way that you would like to be treated.
Right.
I think, unfortunately, we live in a male-dominated world, but every single one of us as men came out of a woman. There can be no child without a woman.
Right.
And so, therefore, for men not to advocate for our equals on the other side of gender, I think that's a problem.
Right. So Farley, your thoughts on this? I mean,
My thoughts on what Andre said?
No,
because I have thoughts on that. If you
Well, you know what? Let's see. Okay. Maybe you can expand on his thoughts. Yeah.
So what I think, and it's the Me Too movement we're talking about, right?
Right. That's correct.
So the Me Too movement is obviously a manifestation of female empowerment and being able to have a voice. Now, we're seeing that in a lot of sectors, whether it be policing or what have you, where the camera and the internet and all those things combined are bringing to light things that were swept under rugs globally. With respect to the church, I'm curious, and hopefully Andre can address this, is
I'm going to try.
The probability if a young 15-year-old young lady says, "Mom, I want to be the Pope," she literally has no chance. Right. If I want to be the Archbishop of, and I don't know all the denominational heads, but let's say Archbishop, I think is a pretty high spot.
Sure.
Right. That's one level above you.
Well, not in my denomination, but everything's above my head.
All right. But I don't think the average young woman who is spiritually motivated, et cetera, can envision herself aspiring to a leadership role, like a major leadership role, not in the local church, but a major leadership role across her denomination. So I would say that in all sectors, as Andre rightly said, male dominance is there. What Me Too has done, it's, and I firmly believe in this, embarrassment and financial impact are the two things that get people to sit up straight and listen. Right. And especially when it comes to the entertainment industry, athletic industry, and industry in general that men dominate. Right. The only way to expose these things is to have some measure of financial impact on that person who is obviously striving to amass massive wealth, or embarrass them so that indirectly they are not going to have access to those mass amounts of wealth. Sure. So that's kind of my take on it.
Okay, that's a very direct point. But my point is, if this being the case, what about those that are legit concerns? I mean, there are certainly, we see in other sectors, aside from just the Me Too movement, where a balance of power, as you say, it's the whistleblowers, being the camera, are, really showcasing some of these things that are happening in our society, things that have been happening for years, centuries.
Yeah.
And now that shift, it's not just about bringing about. It's got to bring about a legitimate change. It's not just about the balance of power, just getting back at someone. There is something wrong here.
Well, all right. I know we're talking about Me Too movement, but let's just pivot for a moment and let's talk a little bit about George Floyd.
Okay.
For years, and we know this, and let me just put the disclaimer, I don't think that all police officers are bad people, but for years, even going back before Rodney King, we've seen some of the injustices that are happening in the street.
Sure.
I praise the Lord for the camera, because the camera for the very first time gave us a close-up on what we have experienced as Black men for literally hundreds of years. And we're talking all the way back to slavery.
Agreed.
As a result of the camera filming this man's life, literally stolen from him, look at what it has done to the entire world. I mean, people don't want to give George Floyd a whole lot of credit because he's dead. But since his death, look at how much more advocacy has been happening around the world globally for all kinds of things.
Right.
People now are saying, well, you know what? I'm no longer going to put up with this or that because it's wrong.
It's given a voice, yes.
So now when you pivot and you now look at the Me Too movement, and let's be honest, even as men, we know that women are underpaid for the same work that we do. But now because of something like a George Floyd situation, we're now on the edge of our seats because we realize justice is important. If both of us are CEOs for a company, both of us are clergies working for the same denomination, we're doing the exact same work. Pay me what I'm worth, not because of my gender, but because of what I bring to your institution.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, I think and nobody can deny that. But I think we have to delve into the systemic nature of it. The systemic, the institutionalized aspects of discrimination are still very, very healthy. The folks who are doling out the funding are the people who are part of the system that's oppressing the funded. Right. So I agree with you that at the superficial media quote unquote level, social level, we're seeing manifestations. Black Lives Matter represents something that people can tangibly attach their morals and principles to. But at the end of the day, until we see true systemic change where any of us could have our children, or in our cases, grandchildren potentially, except for the young guy here, having an equal, legitimately equal chance to be prime minister of this country, CEO of Bell, CEO of Rogers, whatever it may be, right? And being part of the narrative, we tend to be, by virtue of anti-Black racism in particular, we tend to be on the receiving end of advancement all the time. Like global warming, where the Black faces, the scientists, it cuts right across the sector.
Even COVID.
COVID, we have the sister who discovered the mDNA. But it's major. She created the mDNA vaccine. But I agree with you. It's still one face. It's an anomaly, is what I'm saying. I totally agree. But at the end of the day, I think, the Me Too movement, just by virtue of its name, I hope the two includes Black women and includes Indigenous women. I don't see, and I can't, I'm not speaking specifically, but I haven't seen Me Too in the Indigenous community across Canada doing things for Indigenous women who are been missing for now it's, I don't know how many decades now.
Many decades.
But you know what I'm saying? So I want to see these things a little more inclusive, not just the Hollywood star who decided I'm going to join grassroots. Grassroots and inclusive. Inclusivity is key.
But let me bring it back to a second. I want to look at it from the male's perspective. And I want to, like I said, I wanted to discuss a little bit about how it's changing men's attitude
or behavior
and changing men's behavior in the home. What are you seeing? I think, certainly I was on in a program the other day, and I was listening to some of these men talking, and they're talking about how dating has changed for them. And the women were talking about how men are not leaders anymore, and how they become soft, and they're not taking the reins, and so the women are failing to be submissive to them. So how do you reconcile, that when the whole movement is changing the attitudes of the male from the male perspective?
Yeah, you want to go first?
I was just gonna say it's somewhat of a byproduct of the woman too.
Right.
So the woman in that who's part of that household, right? If she was had an affinity for a quote unquote alpha male, a leader, a provider, et cetera, she's not going to gravitate to the Me Too movement with any real fervence.
Right.
If there's sort of some like a balance of any kind, whether it be financial contribution to the home or responsibilities in the home, et cetera, then you're going to find a little more, and not necessarily negative, but a little more discussion around the issue of who's playing what role, or the roles cross-pollinating, et cetera. But for me as a male, the woman I live with is my mother. She's 91 years old. So I have no power. Right? I have no power whatsoever, and I accept that role. And I'm an alpha male. By my own definition of an alpha male, I'm an alpha male.
Yeah, but I make sure you get all of this out of your system.
Absolutely. Yes. But fundamentally, what I would say in closing to this point is that we have men, and we have males, obviously, who become men in terms of their aging process. But I don't think we have people who understand manhood and the responsibility of males, right? And whether that's taken from some sort of prehistoric perspective or current perspective, contemporary perspective, I think we need to truly define what a man is in terms of integrity, morals, those kinds of the intangibles that make up that.
Well, that's what you're here for tonight. That's what this show is about.
Here's part of what I want to add. I don't disagree with you, but I think we also have to see how men, and we're Black men, how we have been treated historically.
Absolutely.
Right? So the reality is, many of our homes, I mean, I'm fortunate. I grew up in a family structure where both my mom and father were there, but that was not the reality for many of my
3 out of 4 in Toronto, fatherless.
So the reality is, you've got a system, and this is where you started with your answer. Systemic racism puts us in the prison system. So most of our homes, by default, have been raised by women who have had to become men because fathers are in the jail. And if we look south of the border, we can see what that looks like. I mean, prison is big business.
Absolutely.
Right. At the end of the day, it is big business. It's not about social reform. It's not about safety. There's a dollars and cents piece put to it. What we really need to do is we have to take a step back and say, how do we keep our men out of the prison system to break the cycle? How do we keep them within the educational process so that you're literally starting at JK or primary, whatever that looks like, and graduating not just with a 4-year degree, but getting your master's, which is becoming the new high school diploma. So the more years, or trade. Thank you for adding that. Because at the end of the day, men will become men when they have responsibilities, because they're still connected to families. If you're not connected to your family and you have no responsibility, so basically you find her, you have a child, but you're not married to her. You're not in the same house. Developmentally, that kind of slows you down, because you don't have the responsibility of saying, I've got this check for $1,000. I can't spend it in the nightclub because I've got to get diapers. I've got to pay for the rent or for the mortgage or the car note. So I think that once we force our culture to give us an opportunity to do what other cultures have been doing. I mean, when you go to Africa or the Middle East, they're not having this conversation because grandfathers, uncles, nephews, they're all in community together. We're seeing this predominantly in the Black community because this is what the system looks like.
The colonized Black community.
The colonized Black community, because this is what it was intended to do. And so at the end of the day, we know what it is. I think the challenge now is, what do we do for those of us that are on the other side of the bars? Because look, women can raise a young man to be a positive contributor, but I'm not sure that she can raise a young man to be a man.
No.
Yeah,
Never.
and I don't think it's impossible because as someone who was raised by a single mother, but what I do think is that the principles, just like any educational process, are there, and the presentation of opportunities. Like what I tell people all the time as an entrepreneur, my mother's never told me no. Like she'll critique an idea, but she won't say no, it's impossible.
Right.
She empowered me by doing that. You know what I'm saying? She didn't. It doesn't matter if she was male or female. She was my parent, and she believes in me.
Right.
You know, and I remember I was interviewed on, I think it was McLean magazine or something. They asked me, how does my family feel about my success? And I said, I have no idea. Oh, no, my mother specifically, they asked. I said, I have no idea. But when I walk into a room, she smiles. Right. And that's all that matters.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? That's all that matters. So to your point, I agree 100%. Obviously, the ideal, we have the ideals, then we have the real. And the real is, as I said, I think it's either 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4 Black families in the GTA are fatherless. Right. But I also harken back to, in the Spartan era. Right. I read an amazing story about the Spartans and what they were. The Spartans and the warriors were treated like NBA all-stars in their community. And what they found was that based on promiscuity and availability of women, etc., there were a lot of illegitimate children or fatherless children carousing around the marketplaces and so forth. So the community, the faith community and the government passed a law, basically, that all the Spartan warriors had to conduct themselves as fathers of all children. Right. So they take a communal approach to now you can transpose that to the communities of colonized Black people. Right. I have friends, depending on the cluster of friends I'm with, of about 5 who might have amongst them 30 kids. Right. I know people like that. And I will, of course, I challenge them and say, I ask them, name them in alphabetical order or something. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, right? I have to step in and be a co-dad. Right. I want to step in and be a co-dad.
Absolutely.
And I think the challenge for Black women accepting that, it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world, but there are great Black fathers out there. And we need to have them represent more than just their
own immediate
progenital. Absolutely. And I think that is one of the solutions.
When we talk about it takes a village, and
exactly.
Certainly it is the responsibility falls on all of us to be able to reach back and be able to help those that are in need. Now we're seeing an element of that, but we just don't see enough of that because, as you say, you yourself have been instrumental in reaching out. Even tell us a little bit about Say It Loud. That is something that's actually reaching out.
Absolutely, by extension. Absolutely,
by extension, doing the same thing. You as a pastor, you have your responsibility in terms of.
We do the same work, bro.
We're doing the same.
We're in different sectors.
Absolutely. I see you saying we're doing the same work.
So
had you gone to Pearson, that would have been different.
But I got friends at Pearson, so you better treat me like I'm from Pearson while I'm from West Hill.
So now on a global scale, we're going to take a quick pause for a commercial, and then we'll be right back. So stay tuned for your sponsor.
If you enjoy our programming and want to help support Black entrepreneurship, please donate today. www.businesstakeout.com/donate. If you enjoy our programming and want to help support Black entrepreneurship, please donate today. www.businesstakeout.com/donate.
No problem.
Lecture
You
was
look at
still
you look
housing
at
and jokers.
you're
So
supporting the church.
But you were saying about the demographics. You go to Pearson, it's South Asian Central.
Yeah. Same
Same
thing
like
with Churchill, right?
Yeah.
Churchill too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I went years ago. I called them. I don't know if I was telling you this story. They were having so much trouble, and they were gonna. Okay. I don't see anything on here. That's right. I'm going online.
You were live.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for bearing with us through our commercial break. So we were discussing the impact of the Me Too movement and just the male role in general. What's happening in the home? What's happening in society as a whole? And we're talking a little bit about how the alpha male is a passing fancy, right? And what women are looking for in a man. Now, when I speak to a woman in general, and they're telling me that, I don't know, it's difficult to find a man. They're not the same. Men are too soft. Men are this, but they're the same woman that would cry me too, right? So, what's a man to do? What do you tell the younger generation? How do they navigate this water? Now, I had spoken just before I get into that. I spoke to someone earlier, and they said to me, you know what? Part of the changing role, it's also happening in the workplace. What is happening here? So, well, the roles that were mostly from a paternal standpoint, like the teachers, nurses, they're still going to mostly women. Not enough men are finding themselves within those roles. But you're talking about the engineers and the trades, and a lot of women are starting to dominate those roles. Yeah. So it's a change that we're seeing, but it's mostly women coming to the workforce and men are being out.
When you say men, what do you mean men? Do you mean all men? Or are we talking about the lack of black men? I think we need to make
No, I'm talking men. I'm talking all
Men in general, okay.
Men in general.
Yeah, because it does change the narrative slightly when you, because I was going to say, actually, to your point about the women who are saying they can't find a good man, many of those women were raised without a father figure in the home. Right. So their map of what this quote unquote the components of what a good man is, they might be oblivious to that. They might learn it on a soap opera or on Power or some show like some TV show, and that's the man for me. So even that has to be healed. And these are things that are manifested out of trauma. Right. You can't forget that, right?
Yeah.
It's trauma.
Well, let me just say this also to you, though, Ched. Yeah. I think we have to be careful about throwing around terms around alpha or beta. Sure. Right? Sure. I think we have to say to ourselves,
negative connotation
what
to that,
makes for a good man? And I think this, I'm the pastor here, right? So I need to take this at some point. Right. The challenge is we're not looking for a spiritual guy. Right. We're looking for the guy on power. We're looking for the guy that's flashy. He speaks well, but everybody knows he may be a certain kind of way. Right. I'm saying that if it takes a village, the village has to decide what is the standard for the man. Mm-hmm. When I think about scripture, right? The Bible says that we were made in the image of God. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know that God is an alpha anything. Mm-hmm. I think that he has character. Right. I think he's consistent. He follows through. He's dependable. He puts in that work even if there's no paycheck. I mean, when you think about who Adam is, there is no exchange of money. And yet that's the man that the Lord says, I'm going to give him a wife. It's not because of his earning power. It's not because when he walks in the room, he's got all these pheromones.
If you enjoy our programming and want to help support Black entrepreneurship, please donate today. www.businesstakeout.com/donate. Business Takeout presents
This is Ched Talks with Chedwick Crieghtney.
And some people are just not open to the idea of their kids, going forward in this industry. So what would you guys say to them?
Honestly, the only thing you can do is support, because the people that don't have the support have a harder time making it.
Right.
It's just that simple.
Right.
And support doesn't necessarily mean you got to be all up in it, but it just means you got to let them know that you're with them and you're okay with it. Because a lot of people are so stressed, they got to make something happen now, because if they don't, their parents are going to force them to something else. And if you just support them, and
I say also just in general work ethic, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, work ethic will be the telltale of if you make it or not.
we're back. Thank you again for your patience. We're having some technical difficulties here in the studio, but I am certain that you're following our conversation. If you want to hear more, you want to tune in more to some of the our past podcasts, please go to Ched Talks on YouTube, on Instagram, and on Facebook. Or you can go on Business Takeout and you'll be able to find any of our last few podcasts. Thank you again for joining us. Now, we were discussing the changing roles in the home, and we're discussing more specifically the fact that a lot of the more nurturing roles within the business environment or business community were being still gobbled up by mostly women, yet while some of the more traditional male roles, as an engineer, lawyers, doctors, that were professionals, are being eaten up by majority female now.
I don't know if it's eaten up by majority, but I'd say that there's a higher percentage.
Let's just say a higher percentage
Yeah,
of
yeah.
women are now entering into those.
Yeah, definitely. That I
So-
agree with 100%.
So what does the men do? What do the men do?
Well, hold on. Before we talk about that,
Mm-hmm.
are they getting paid for the work that they're now entering into?
That's a good point. That certainly is something that I think that we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Is the realization that things have to change, and the tide that's gone with the YouTube movement. It certainly has brought to light that certainly women should be awarded for work done. Now, assuming that's the
Compensated,
case,
I would say. And this is the issue. I mean, nothing is going to change with this YouTube movement until it's dollar for dollar.
right?
Because at the end of the day, women are still dependent on us as men because they are not paid for the work that they do.
Yeah.
Right? So even though we're seeing this emergence in science, technology, engineering, math, and some of these arts, we're seeing women that are no longer in this private sector taking care of kids and so on and so forth. They're no longer, well, they're still there, but not just support workers. They're now in roles that historically have been for men. The reality is, the strength behind it is, when you get your check at the end of the week, and I get my check, and we've got the same years of service, same education, it both needs to say $1,000.
Right.
But I agree with that 100%. But when we talk about the ideal, and this is going to fly in the face of aspects of Me Too, not all aspects.
Mhm.
But what is the ideal household? Right? Like, from a nurturing and parenting standpoint. Like a couple, irrespective of gender, whatever it may be, two engineers leaving, you live in the suburbs, you work at a firm downtown Toronto, pre-COVID, pre-Zoom, etc.
Mhm.
And you leave home at 6 a.m.
Mhm.
You've got, I assume, a caregiver of some kind with your young children. You're gone, you get home at 7 p.m. Kids are going to bed at 8 p.m. The connection between parent and child is impacted for sure
Yeah.
by a dual economic model, like our income model.
Sure.
Right? So I'm going back sort of far,
Right.
but the idea is, when we look at the decline, or the increase, I should say, in the manifestation of lack of parenting,
Right.
it probably aligns graphically exactly with the employment trends,
I agree.
right? So that's the other question we got to ask ourselves. Like, the economics of a commercial society dictate that, like, if you want to buy a house anywhere in Toronto, it's $1 million and change. You need 2 incomes to qualify,
Mhm.
So those things force the behavior.
Right.
But we also live in bigger houses than we should,
Right.
right?
Sure.
If we would minimize our game a little bit,
Yeah.
one income could probably take care of it,
Right.
right? Minus, and you're taking away childcare and
I
all those.
understand. Yeah.
You understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
So we gotta really identify the ideal, like you said, as a community.
Yeah.
Right.
As a community, identify the ideal.
Well, that goes back to education. That goes back to educating your kids, and we know that the education system is not focused on educating the kids to become astute business people, right?
Okay. Yeah, in general.
They're not in general.
In
They're
general.
not. And neither are they interested in educating them in how to manage from an economical standpoint their home,
Yeah.
right? So that comes down to the choice, and it comes down to the parents who are not there because they're too busy earning their own money.
Right.
So I say the next generation is going to have a real tough. One, they're not going to be financially
capable to be able to afford homes in most
In the
industrial
GTA.
cities.
The greater
I'm not even
GTA.
just talking just in GTA. In most industrial cities, the way that the larger cities are going, most younger people are not going to be able to afford
Yeah, but
those.
Cheddy, we're
So
still
they're,
talking about.
they're gonna have to decide what is it that you want. And again, when I say that, okay, if we say we're both nurturing, we're going to take turns looking after the kids, and we're gonna have equal roles in the home. We're gonna have equal roles in terms of bringing financial stability to the home. Who looks after the kids? The kids get that halfway.
We're still talking about the system, right?
Yeah. Well,
So let's take a look at some of the cultures that are really thriving in the city of Toronto. This is where this conversation is happening.
right.
All right. Grandparents heavily involved. Support workers that are brought in from other countries to take care of their children
Right.
while they're at work, accumulating this wealth, getting their education. The system, that's where we have to tackle this thing. Because at the end of the day, here's the thing. Even when we look at the immigration process from Jamaica to Canada, it's changed. You took some of our brightest and best people, and then you closed the border once you felt you had enough of those individuals. So the ones that are left behind, they don't get to come here easy and take care of their grandchildren. There's a whole lot of red tape, point system, you name it. By the time some of them come here, because they're so old, the country won't take them because they have pre-existing health issues.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, give people of color, give those individuals an opportunity to have the same foot forward that every other culture had, and now they're living in Forest Hill. Every time I drive through that neighborhood, it saddens me. Now, I'm not mad at whoever's living there, the wealth that they have. I'm not upset with them. This is a systemic issue.
Right.
But some of those children that are now doctors and lawyers, it was our people that taught them how to read.
Right.
Our people that brought them to daycare. Our people that put them to bed.
Sure.
While their parents were getting second and third degrees, which now allow them to be the heads of hospitals, having all these kind of different corporations. It was our people.
And all those children have therapists.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Which is covered by the work that they do through the hospital.
Right. They have their
Right? So,
No, but let me ask you a question as a theologist,
Yeah.
an esteemed theologist.
Thank you for the title.
No problem.
I didn't have that when I walked in today.
No problem at all.
All right.
Yeah, that's how we aim to educate.
There's specific religions that still have largely a patriarchal model.
Yeah.
They live in these same big cities.
Yeah.
They survive. They probably live more of a minimalist lifestyle, right? But the rearing and the raising of children is, I would say, intact.
Okay.
More so than the dual income, never home, weekend stuff happens, of course, but I don't know. The old model still actually works,
It
Okay,
does.
where?
right?
It works.
No,
now.
as I said, if you want to go specifically in the Muslim communities,
It still works.
it's still very patriarchal. I'm not commenting on the negative. I'm just talking about the woman's acceptance to fulfill the role, the maternal role, till the child, just like the animal kingdom, till the child can fend for itself, right?
It's not a perfect system. I hear you.
It's not perfect. And obviously there's always gonna be bad apples
For
and bad.
everything. Everything.
But generally speaking,
Yeah.
right? The retention of culture, tradition, language. Like if you think about it, like one of my biggest frustrations is I am not connected to a culture, technically. Like my first name is given, so I have no concerns with that. My last name is a Portuguese slave name, right? It doesn't make sense for me to be even speaking English right now, right? That's all a result of colonization and the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah.
So we, as Black people in this hemisphere, we actually have no real identity. And we're talking about this when we talk about the whole idea of building particular infrastructure that we represent our presence here and sense of belonging. But if I came from Mars and drove through Toronto, I wouldn't have one clue what Black people own, or how they were represented in the most diverse city in the world. There's nothing to show. Like you could say to the West, but they don't own the buildings. The Italians do.
It's all right. It's all right.
You know what I'm saying? Like what really proves we're here?
Right. Yeah. Aside from the
So
culture.
so we say it's systemic.
The culture is strong.
Yeah.
Aspects of the culture.
Aspects of the culture. So we say systems. How do we fix the system? What can the average person watching tonight? 2 ways. Some of the young, it's 2 days.
2 ways.
2 ways. Okay, so what can some of the young people do? First of all, young people watching tonight, they're frustrated. Young men, particularly, they're frustrated. They're going through a system that's not geared for them, to not setting them up for success. They're looking at you as men, man of cloth and men of success. What can you say to them that will encourage them, motivate them, inspire them to continue, rather than just saying, throwing their arms up in frustration and say, look, you know, man, I've had enough of this crap. What do we do? What do we say to them? And then secondly, and what do we do to save this, change the system?
I'm going to say it. My belief in God is everything. I'm not saying that because the camera's running. I do believe in God.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I do believe that God has the capacity to take whatever context it is, as long as you still operate in the confines of what character looks like. I do believe that God turns it around. Let me just give you one quick example. We know the story of Joseph. That's one of the stories that everybody grew up. We know that he was rejected by his brothers, brought into Egypt in a system that never embraced him. What does he do? He keeps his head down and he does what he has to do. And the Bible says the Lord was with him. By the time we get to the famine, I'm just doing a quick little educational moment. We see something that happens when he's finally reunited with his brothers who have completely rejected him. What do we see in that moment? He's second in command and still not at the table, able to eat with the Egyptians, because there's no way they're going to do that because he's Hebrew and they're Egyptians. Now, there are parallels to what we're talking about in terms of systemic racism.
Right.
Joseph doesn't get caught up on whether or not they embrace him or not. He thrives because he's in the room and the Lord is with him. Those two things, I know you've got two, I've got mine too. Number one, God, your faith in God. And number two, find a way to be in the room. You see, one of the challenges I find is that everybody's trying to create their own room. Yeah. And there is a time for that, right? Especially since we've been talking about entrepreneurial things, there's a time for you to create your own room. But in the meantime, you've got to be in the room that controls the resources, how money is doled out, who's going to get the check this way and that way. If you're not in the room, you can't help anyone. So while I understand the spirit of the entrepreneur, because not everybody's going to work for somebody, but somebody has to. And that's Joseph. And as a result of him being okay working for somebody, second in command, which means he's not just grassroots, he's a decision maker. By doing that, he completely understands the economy. And I know you guys are going to talk a little bit about money. And this is the reason why science, technology, engineering, and math is so important, especially to people of color, is you cannot change a system that you do not understand how it operates.
And that you don't participate.
There it is.
I know, I agree with you as your second point. First point, I have a problem with. All right, that's fine. Right? Not a problem. But I think if you asked a 16-year-old black male in the city of Toronto, generally speaking, and you gave him the history of the I don't know if this is the correct term, devoutedness, is that a correct term?
Oh, that's a new one for me too.
Okay, but devout, black people in this hemisphere are some of the most devout people as far as faith.
Okay, that's what you're talking about. All right, we'll go with you.
I don't know, when you look at it objectively, I think we got a slap in the face, man. Like, I don't think that there's anybody can say that faith has turned it around for black people in this hemisphere. I mean, I still believe in our resilience and so forth. But you know, there were 72 murders in Toronto last year. 66 were young black men. Like, and this is every single year, over and over and over. The Royal McMurtry, where I do work, the Correctional Institute, has 50 young men in there. 48 are black. And we only represent, in the GTA, 9% of the population. But with 98, so it's the system. And then you go to Africa where we belong, and our resources are exploited by foreign entities. Poverty is like abject poverty, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't see the breakthrough that Christianity has provided. Right. That I'm saying that as Farley, but also based on young people that I speak to. Right. They're looking, where's my mom? They'll say to you, my mom goes to church every Sunday, is on her knees praying every single night. Yeah. But my fridge is empty.
Yeah, but faith without works is dead, Farley, and that's the point that I'm making.
So no, but you're assuming there's no works.
No, I'm not saying there's no works.
Oh,
I'm saying faith and works.
Yeah. Well, you know,
one last point, if I may. Sorry. Yeah. The other point is that just to answer the more practical, from a more practical standpoint. Yeah. I think what we need to do as elders and leaders, we need an elders council, national elders council, to replicate or at least simulate our African heritage. Number one. But also, I think we have to steer our youth into, to your point, to getting into the room, into the careers that actually bring joy and satisfaction and reward, but also move the Black race forward. And that's something the Jews have done. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Olympia in New York, the Overmans and the Reitmans families. When coming out of the Russian Revolution, right? If you were the daughter of a clergy person, you married the son of a business person. If you're a son who was in the clergy, you married the daughter of a business person. Like they had a structural plan, right? And if you look at the Jewish community, and they're not as devout as a lot. I mean, I'm in the entertainment industry. I can tell you, they're not the most devout people.
You're talking about religiously, right?
Religiously, yes, religiously, right? But they have this indoctrination into, first of all, their slogan, never again, speaking to the Holocaust, and they have their own language. Like normally you can be a Russian Jew, a Swiss Jew, an Ethiopian Jew, Hebrew is your language. We're missing some fundamental common denominators as Black people. We don't have a common language. We don't have a common faith. This is to support, when I say faith from your perspective, and faith in terms of spirituality in a more holistic, indigenous context, right? And I also, my last point, which is one of the things that's always disturbed me since I was 10 years old, my mother was washing apples in the kitchen sink, and I said, you have to show me why I should adopt something from the person who enslaved my people. Because Christianity, to most Black people in the Western Hemisphere, is a white religion, provided by whites with whips in their hands, guns in their hands, and beating our women and raping our kids. And I'm like, you got to bring me home on that one.
Yeah, but you're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Actually, in this case, I would.
No, hold on a second. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate it, and I'm hearing you. Yeah. But I'm not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? And by the way, Cheddy, this is great. Some people might be uncomfortable because we're disagreeing. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so am I.
But the reality is, I'm saying we make some assumptions based on the way that you've positioned your statement. That spirituality is European.
No,
I'm talking about religion, right?
So not spirituality, not the same thing.
So I'm making the connection because religion, now we're talking about faith groups, we're talking about denominations, right? So what I'm saying to you is, I choose, when I read the Bible, I'm not making it from the colonizers because I understand.
That's who gave it to you, though.
That's a whole new different conversation that we should probably come back to.
I would love to.
No, I want to.
I would love to.
I'd love to have you guys back.
And we will. But what I will still say is this, that most people groups that are continuing to grow and thrive, they do have a belief in a higher something. Right. In our community.
Say that again?
No,
go further back. Most people
that are thriving, people groups, have a belief in a higher something.
I completely disagree.
That's okay.
No, but can I tell you why?
Sure. Now remember, the term thriving.
Here's what I consider thriving to be. Thriving is, I'm an indigenous person living in northern Alberta. The hunting, the fishing, the culture of everything that I am. I'm not even allowed. I am it. I'm not even. There's no separation. I am fishing. I am hunting. I am sculpting. Whatever the things that are identifiably their culture are no prohibitive anything around them. That's thriving to me. Thriving to me is, I don't know what you actually meant by thriving, but thriving to me is, and from a hierarchical standpoint, they don't see themselves above the water or above an ant or above a fly or above an eagle or above a tree. That to me is thriving. So that's the life our African ancestors thrive. When we were thriving, that's the life we live. And last session, indigenous people around the world, Australia, northern China, you name it, indigenous people thrive, right, in their own environment when they live in harmony with the land. and all those things. So I don't know what you meant by thriving, but that is the definition of thriving to me.
I want to come back
So
to
let
the point.
me play referee for a moment. Thank you guys. This is
We're on fire from the studio.
This is a fire, and I'm sure that most of you coming in here today or looking in have some questions. Do we have any questions? Let me ask the producers for a second if we have any questions from the audience.
Just some comments.
Just comments?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll
Farley's
get back
a
to
bully.
those comments
That's how-
later on.
Farley's a bully. Anybody say I'm a bully?
No, nobody's a bully.
No, there ain't no bullies here, man. We're just talking.
No bullies here. I just want to make sure that we take a good commercial break and make sure everyone understands that we are live. We're coming in hot with these two conversationalists.
Yeah.
So let's go back to that. So what Farley's saying is that, okay, so here's a thriving community prior to being dominated, right? And chains and now taking completely out of their context of existence, right?
Sure.
Now, you're saying from a historical standpoint or religious standpoint that they were connected through the Bible, religion. That's why it made them thrive.
No, what I'm saying to you is, I'm not just talking about Christianity. So while I have my own personal belief
Right.
in God, that is an Andre thing. That's a pastor.
What's your denomination?
I'm Adventist. I'm
Adventist. Okay.
Adventist, right? So we have some of our roots in Judaism. So when I heard you talking about Jews and Hebrew and some of what you were mentioning a few moments ago, I'm hearing you, because what I'm saying to you is above and beyond just the never again. There are many different feasts that happen throughout the year.
True.
That commemorate many things that happen in the Bible,
Right.
in the Torah,
Yeah.
from the minor and major prophets, etc. I mean, we're not doing the theology so much today. I'm saying the never again is connected to the great Exodus also. Well, who delivered from the great Exodus? The same God that we often put into the back room and we're not comfortable saying it in front of the camera. That people group, they believe that there was a God that took them out of Egypt, and slowly but surely.
Where are the black people in that story?
Hold on a second, I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there because
When we're delivering, because I'm still waiting on my package.
Because I do understand, because one of the things that we have to understand is that the colonizers, those that we often say brought us the religion, I hear that point, but as a black man who also has access to the Bible, done extensive education and minored in different things at the seminary and so on and so forth, we understand that there's no way that Jesus could have been a white man. This is where the church now has to come back into the conversation, because we have to be able to exegete the Bible from an ancient Near Eastern perspective, and not just from Europe to North America. When we do it in the appropriate way, we begin to see God's divine hand, not through the colonizer, but through the message that has brought those people out of Egypt into Canaan. And let's be clear. These have to be people of color coming out of Egypt.
Okay,
Right.
but
we can debate this.
Yeah, yeah, but
I'm definitely gonna have you
come
guys.
on, bro.
No, I got it.
No, yes, no, one thing. I'm gonna ask a question. It's a question. So it's gonna be short.
1 minute.
Do you realize, or would you agree, that were you not the product of colonization, you may not actually be a Christian?
Why are you saying that I wouldn't be a Christian?
No, because the vehicle through which you were indoctrinated into Christianity was when Gutenberg created the printing press and propagated the Bible all across everywhere, right? That's when Christianity, along with the things like the Crusades and yada, 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 all that stuff, right? But that was the major, like, think of going from nothing to the internet. The printing press, the amount of Bibles that were printed by Gutenberg, right, is what propagated Christianity.
Right.
And remember, the church at that time was equivalent to government, which is no longer the case in this hemisphere. In this hemisphere.
So are you also saying then that the Torah, that is also the colonizers as well?
Well, the Torah
I'm
and the
asking
Quran. No, but here's what I'm saying. I'm talking about the delivery package.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. I don't care. It could say made in China,
Mhm.
right? But guess what? It's still on my kitchen table.
Mhm.
right? But who brought it to my kitchen table? The mailman.
So can I also say this to you? And
Okay,
this,
hold on. All right.
oh no, hold on a second. You gotta let me respond.
Yeah,
I
I
agree.
agree.
That's 30 seconds.
Here's the point that I'm trying to make to you, Farley. I'm saying to the individual that reads the Bible exclusively in English, I can see the flaw of it through those eyes.
Right.
But one like me and many other theologians around the world, not just in Europe, but in Africa, in the Caribbean, South America, you name it, we have had an opportunity to take a look at the scriptures in the language, the original language. And that's why I said Torah.
Yeah,
Right?
I get
I get that piece. And here's what I've decided through my own research. And again, I know that we're not going to be able to do this conversation of justice here.
Right.
But I do believe that the Bible is still inspired despite the hands of which it has been passed through.
I know you believe that.
That's what I believe.
And I think most Christians
Right.
believe that.
So just as we are speaking a language that is not indigenous to us, we don't throw the language away just because it's not our mother tongue. We use it as a means to create information and create change. So we're not here arguing about English. Why?
Right.
Because this is the way that we talk.
Yeah.
Can we use English as a means to get into the room? Absolutely. Are we able to understand concepts through English? Absolutely. I'm able to understand God through that same Bible, despite the hands that it may have been passed through. And I've chosen to go deeper with it as a pastor because I know that I'm going to have that
Have you
conversation.
studied your oral traditions of
guys.
Africans?
So
That are older than
we
the
gotta
Torah?
wrap. We gotta wrap. So it's an inspiring conversation, and we do have some comments coming up or questions. Maybe you guys can help me with that because my eyes can't see.
Oh, you're supposed to read that?
Yeah. Okay. So someone asked, do you think that gender roles from a religious standpoint are outdated? Oh, this is a question to everyone.
This is what we talked about.
That's
what we talked about.
Yes, just to answer your question, yes, I think that question was brought up and answered. Perhaps you may have missed it, but I think we are all in agreement that this definitely is antiquated. It definitely
I didn't
is
say
a
that.
bit old.
Speak
What did you
for-
say?
No, I said that in the Muslim faith, as an example,
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. So
it's only outdated in the Western greedy commercial society,
right.
right? And where people want a house that they can't be in, they can't even see half the house when they're in one room, right? That's just greed, right? But you go to Sweden and Denmark and people living in a family of 5 live in a room this side very comfortably.
Right. So Farley wants to live in a room with 5, and
You didn't say 5 what?
and yeah. So any other questions? Any other question from the audience? No other questions. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. I certainly hope you were able to learn something from from our guests tonight. I'm glad that they were on, and we're probably gonna have to do a part 2.
Yeah, we got
because
to do part 2.
this conversation got real live and real loud.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping you're still able to decipher the information that you need. We are all in agreement that we're brothers here. We love one another.
Yeah.
The conversation is to educate, motivate, and elevate you who are tuning in tonight. Anyone can tune in. Anyone can have a question, and we will be able to answer. Oh, so now there's a question for you, Farley. My question is to Brother Farley. Farley is what shaped from what? Can you read that?
Form should the cultural identity of Black people take, considering the fact that Asian and European cultures have different nuances to them?
Absolutely. I think it needs to be embedded in our Afrocentricity. We need to go back physically or spiritually or however we can through the internet to our African origins and recognize the power of who we are. Google's algorithms are based on something called the fractals at the heart of Africa. It's based on the way African communities are structured. But nobody's going to put that in the New York Times, guys, or the whatever the equivalent of is in Canada. So the reality is, the only way we will find ourselves is to be ourselves. The only way to be ourselves is to be Afrocentric in our every element. The oral traditions of Africa, we didn't document like the Europeans or even the Middle Eastern people. We didn't document things the way, I guess somebody could say we should have or could have.
Yeah.
We just didn't do it. We passed it on orally, right? This is why we dominate the oral world, right? That's part of why we do that. But at the end of the day, if we go back and talk to the ancestors and the knowledge keepers, just like the indigenous people do, right, we will get those answers, and that is what will form and shape who we are.
Thank you. Any other questions? No other questions. So my guests, my users here tonight, or my viewers, I thought they would have a lot more questions, but perhaps some of the technical difficulties we
Maybe the answers are so prolific.
How do you think young men will have restructured their position in their household with the current job market?
Well, go ahead. I think that we're looking at an evolution, a transformation, right? We're in a transformational phase. So there's going to be a lot more people, as you could probably imagine, working from home, right? A lot more independent entrepreneurs. So the people who work from home could work for someone, but from home. But there's also going to be home-based businesses are going to be continue to be on the rise. Right. That's what I think most of the young men and women, but to answer your question, young men will find their place in the economy, right? As opposed to having to drive downtown in a gas guzzling car when you're against those kind of things. You can provide that same service from the confines of the
And let me also say this too. We have to remember, in this moment, even though we've disagreed, we're showing our community how you resolve the tension of ideas and thoughts, right? So at the end of the day, our young people learn by listening to those that are older with more experience. It doesn't mean we have more knowledge. It just means we have more experience. Right. So as we share ideas, because not everybody believes that the way out is science, technology, engineering, and math. Not everybody believes that. Right. There may be another way as the economy begins to shift. But if we're not having these kind of open conversations where people are allowed to disagree, then guess what? The answers or the solutions happen in some dark room where there's no exposure to light.
100%.
And that's one of the reasons why I love this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. And we will continue it. But for now, this is Ched Talks, and thank you again for joining me here tonight. And we're out.
If you enjoy our programming and want to help support Black entrepreneurship, please donate today. www.businesstakeout.com/donate.